It is an incredible joy, uplift to be able to share this service with people who are present, who are singing, all of us together. This is something that maybe we used to take for granted. I don't think we're ever going to take for granted the incredible blessing of being able to sing our prayers together. So I just want to say Shehecheyanu, to thank God that we are here, that we have the strength as a community, that we can regain that sense of joy from what it means for us to be together. And we also welcome all who are joining us virtually, and we're constituting a kehillah, a congregation, wherever we happen to be, and recognizing that our borders and our boundaries are more flexible than they perhaps were in the past. I want to just ask a question. I'm going to offer an answer, and then hopefully we will have something to think about and something to energize us for the rest of the holiday and beyond. So Passover celebrates the journey from a narrow place to a wider place. From the constraints of Mitzrayim, the word for Egypt has to do with Meitzar, with feeling constrained, to the expanse of the wilderness, and ultimately the promised land. So here's my question. How do we expand? How do we transcend the constraints that we are feeling? How do we move ourselves from Mitzrayim to a place that is more open with more opportunity? And one answer I want to suggest is that a major way for us to do that is to be of use to somebody else. Initially, it sounds counterintuitive. How do you yourself feel less constrained by being of use to someone else? But remarkably, we have all found again and again that when we reach out to other people, when we are of use to them, when we can listen to them, help them, offer advice, offer perhaps concrete help and support, that it actually strengthens us and it liberates us. Dr. David Pelkovitz is a professor of psychology, and he spoke to a group of rabbis I was part of, and he said that acts of kindness are a superpower. It's sort of like you are drinking something that gives you strength. When you are kind to somebody else, it gives you a sense of power. It releases you into the world in a way that very few other things do. There are so many examples of this from our ancient history. I want to give you an example from more recent history. Many of us know and love Vera Eden, who is a member of our congregation, a survivor of the Shoah, and she spoke in this setting about her experience in Auschwitz. She spoke about what it means to be imprisoned in a barracks with other women, and how horrifying and terrifying it was, and how intentional were the Nazis' efforts to dehumanize each and every one of them. But she also said that again and again, she and the people that she was with performed small acts of kindness for each other. If one of them found an extra crust of bread and the other seemed hungrier, then that person would give it to the other. If one person was losing their faith and losing their ability to carry on, then someone else would try to give that person a little bit of hope in that particular moment. They provided each other with physical and emotional support each and every day. Sometimes, when we are in a very narrow place, we can perform acts for each other that are anything but narrow, acts that open up expanses, not just for the other people, but also for us. So I want to just offer a brief insight about a moment in the story of the Exodus. It's the moment when God stepped in and began to really move the process along. At that moment, we read, "Vayishma Adonai et kolenu, vayar et onyenu, v'yetzam aleinu, v'yet lachatzenu." So God heard our voices, and God saw our suffering and our oppression, and then God stepped in. Now, that seems simple enough. But hundreds of years after the story of the Exodus, a particular scholar said, God must have seen something else. God didn't just see the suffering. God saw something else that moved God to want to step in that moment. And what did God see? Ma ra'ah shebnei Yisrael hayu merachamim ze al zeh. God saw that the children of Israel acted compassionately towards each other. God saw that at the end of the day, if one of them had more straw left over, he or she would give it to somebody else so that person could meet their quota and not be punished by the Egyptian taskmasters. Sometimes, when we are in a small space, we are capable of acting in a big way, and that releases us. It allows us to expand, and it sets things in motion. Folks, this time of constraint that we have been in together, this time of constraint, which seems to be resolving but is not resolved yet, this time has been a time and continue to be a time for us to reach out. Our friends and our family need us more than ever. Our friends and our family who are down on their luck, our friends and our family who are mourning loved ones, our friends and our family who have felt vulnerable and in need of our help. Many people, we know who they are. They need us to be merachamim ze al zeh. They need us to be compassionate, and we need it too. We know that we need it, and so we need to offer it as well. When we reach out, we expand the confines, we become less stuck, we start to leave Mitzrayim. One final thought. This past Tuesday night, I was in our youth house and I was teaching with Rabbi Siegel, the director of our youth house. We were teaching about the Haggadah, and Avi asked the students to look at different depictions of the four children and to talk about them and what they might mean. So Avi then spoke about a version, an artistic rendering of the four children that was made by David Moss, a very famous artist. And in this rendering, each of the four children is depicted on a playing card. So one of them is a jester, and the other one is a scholar, and there were two others. And so what Avi said was that we have to realize that we are dealt certain cards in life. A group of teenagers knows that each of them, they have different qualities, they have different strengths, they have different struggle. We are given a certain deck of cards that we need to play. However, we can choose how to play them. We can choose how to play the cards that we are dealt. The cards that we are dealt do not completely define us. And so I want to say to us, as we begin to discover what the next new normal will be, the cards that we are dealt do not completely define us. And when we feel most stuck and most confined, we have choices to make. And the biggest choices that we can make is, how are we going to relate to the people around us? Are we going to close ourselves in, or are we going to open ourselves up? To the extent that we open ourselves up, we will begin to release ourselves from many of the confines that seem to be implacable. When we reach out, we reawaken our superpower. It is that remarkable how much power we get when we reach out to other people. And then we start to leave Mitzrayim. Then we start to leave the narrow space. So I urge us to continue to do it one person at a time, one outreach at a time, so that we can walk towards the promised land together. Chag Sameach.